Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.
The National Weather Service.
Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's edition of Alaska Weather. Looking at the spring flood potential map here, of course, highest up here where there's, I guess, above average snowfall, so the snowmelt runoff a little higher there. Pretty much equal right through the center of the area, below average, so not much chance of seeing flooding due to a rapid snowmelt off in these areas. And then for the breakup map today, the new one out, you can see, well, the Yukon pretty well still iced up, but the Tanana River showing some open areas here. And I'd heard the tripod at Nenana on the Nenana River, or the tripod on the Tanana River at Nenana has fallen shortly after 5 o'clock or around 5 this afternoon, which, if true, was a heck of a lot earlier than last year. And then for the fire danger, we've got an area of kind of extreme today going on along and down slope of the eastern Alaska Range there. That's due to the windy conditions, wind gusts up over 40 miles per hour occurring at Delta, and pretty breezy conditions all through that area. So due to that, extreme fire dangers over in that area. That should improve this evening, and with the warning there ending at about 9 p.m. And moving on to the satellite, you can see a lot of clear out here, resulting in some pretty good sunshine over the western portions and areas in across the Tanana Valley, Copper River Basin, brisk south winds there, and down into south central Alaska, Madanuska, Susitna valleys. And you start picking up the clouds as you head south, but a lot of sunshine today. Very few clouds over the southeast coast, and basically high pressure. And this front, of course, rain the entire day with very brisk winds there across Kodiak Island, and also Bristol Bay as well, with gusts running 40 to 45 miles an hour, gale force winds, maybe even gusts of 50 miles an hour here around Kodiak Island. Rain spread up into the Seldovia and Homer area today, as well as Seward saw a little bit of rain, and Whittier also catching some moisture as well. But most of the rain here staying south of places like Valdez and Cordova. And then an area of rain but less wind extending back along the Alaska Peninsula. But Pilot Point seeing gusts up 40 miles an hour, as did King Salmon. Koliganek seeing gusts close to 50 miles an hour. But again, the wind's lighter here over the eastern Aleutians with areas of low clouds, fog, and rain. The Pribilof seeing occasional rain or snow or fog, or a combination of all three throughout the day today. And pretty good northeast winds, up to 30 miles an hour in that area. But again, a lot of sunshine up here with the clear skies up to the north, Seward Peninsula. In this area you can see breaking out a little bit this afternoon. And then that low cloud and fog condition along the Arctic coast. But there were some showers developing. One sprinkles got into the Fairbanks area this afternoon. There are also some showers here over the western north central part of the state, say in the greater Tanana, Indian Mountain, Huslia area. Some light showers, and possibly even into the Koyukuk Valley. But back out to the west here, the Bering Sea, good northwest winds you can see coming across Adak and Atka, about 30-35 miles an hour there, some rain and snow showers, better conditions out to the west. On the chart today, here's that low center just south of, say, Sand Point there on the peninsula, with the front at 10 a.m., roughly in this position here, gradually coming northward, and you can see the gradient pulling the wind and moisture right into the east side of Kodiak Island. And it gets a little more discontinuous here coming across the Alaska or the Aleutian Range, and just some areas of light rain or scattered showers there through this area, then more moisture back out to the west, and some hit and miss showers, as I mentioned, over the interior. But the southeast coast, light winds under high pressure and a lot of sunshine today. So skies will stay fair there tonight. Might see a little bit of an increase in the clouds, but nothing too, probably nothing you'll notice at all. The main band of moisture here is still a fair ways off the coast. Continuous rain tonight, Kodiak Island. Winds beginning to come down a little bit, especially on the south side there as that front edges its way northward. The low center tracking eastward here, so you can stay in that light wind condition across the Alaska Peninsula. But those northwest winds of today over the central Aleutians shifting eastward, so we'll see a big increase in the winds tonight here for the eastern Aleutians, but nothing too damaging or serious there. But definite increase in the 30 gusts 40 plus range later on tonight and into tomorrow. No change for the eastern bearing of the Pribilofs here. A few flurries up around St. Lawrence Island again, as you saw today there with IFR conditions, especially on the northern coast. And variably cloudy for the Seward Peninsula, not too bad. I think any moisture will stay down over Norton Sound. And then a few scattered light rain or snow showers, probably becoming just snow showers over the higher elevations here, like the Brooks Range. Otherwise, fair and still some patchy areas of low clouds and fog on the Arctic coast. We'll see on the east side, but tomorrow, general offshore flow there should make for VFR skies on the eastern coast, and then no change though another day, much like today on the central and west side. But pretty good conditions here, some scattered isolated showers possible over the eastern Brooks Range, maybe over the Yukon Valley areas, down to the White Mountains. Tanana Valley looking really good, mostly sunny again, and then some isolated shower conditions possible here over the Copper River Basin areas, the Alaska Range. Chance of rain here, Kenai Peninsula again, like today from Whittier down to Seward, on over to Seldovia and Homer, back eastward here, Iliamna, and then up the inlet, mostly on the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range. Periods of rain and fog continuing Kodiak Island. Those winds continue to edge downward. Starting out with some gales persisting here across the Barren Islands, small craft advisories into the North Gulf Coast. Lighter winds for the Panhandle for the most part. Could see some small craft advisories there. Out to the west, showers here of rain or snow, becoming generally all rain in the afternoon hours. Still pretty gusty on those northwest winds there for Dutch Harbor and Unalaska. And a little bit of an increase in the wind, but nothing too bad here for the Alaska Peninsula, with some showers mainly on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. Weak high pressure there, as high pressure areas go, really just there due to a lack of storminess rather than a presence of any strong high pressure, giving mostly fair skies. And a lot of sunshine here over the north slope, western Brooks Range, some variable clouds there on the Seward Peninsula, mostly on the north coast. Pretty nice day, Nome, Golovin, White Mountain on the south side there, mostly sunny, on down into the Unalakleet area, and then some scattered showers and some variable cloudiness over most of the southwest part of the state. And for Sunday, it looks like the heaviest rain will occur Saturday night along the North Gulf Coast. And then as this front continues to dissipate and weaken along the area on Sunday, it should become a little more discontinuous and showery, if not just flat out end altogether for Yakutat and Cordova. But staying kind of damp and unsettled, not only over the Kenai Peninsula, but the southeast coast as well. Mostly cloudy skies, unsettled showery conditions as that weakening front just sort of dies over the area. This low hanging back south of Kodiak Island, so that flow around, that's going to keep it cloudy and occasionally damp, especially on the east side of the island and in the main city there through Sunday and into Sunday evening. Could see a fair amount of sunshine breaking out over much of Bristol Bay. King salmon kind of on the western edge of the moisture there for a few clouds, and some leftover moisture, winds diminishing here for the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutian areas. High pressure building into the eastern Bering now, so that will tend to dry it out, maybe break the clouds out a little bit there. All the way up from the Seward Peninsula, just some variable cloudiness on down to the south. This system tracking eastward a little bit farther than the north may bring a little moisture with a warm front into maybe Adak during the day Sunday for possible marginal to IFR conditions at times. And then the cold front about to push into the Shimia area with some small craft advisory winds and occasional rain. Up along the Arctic coast, a trough catching the central and eastern areas for some continued clouds. Probably see an increase in that from tomorrow, especially on the east side. Will be VFR, probably looking at IFR with a little brisk on the east winds there and some low clouds and fog. and flurries there from Kaktovik, Barter Island, all the way over to Barrow. Very nice, though, to the west. Temperatures today in the upper 40s to mid 50s across the southeast coast. Sitka at 48 and a 55 at Klawock, 54 at Juneau, 45 at Yakutat, lower 40s for the North Gulf Coast. Anchorage up to 50. Gusty southeast winds here, both in the Matanuska Valley and Turnagain Arm there, but lighter winds up at Talkeetna, 50 degrees there. 41 Kodiak, 39 Akiak, 46 up at Gulkana there in the Copper River Basin. Near 50 Tanana Valley, you can see a 49 there. Fairbanks with the wind, 47 degrees at Delta. Same thing at Northway, but minus the wind in that location. 51 at Tanana, 45 Battles, 36 Anatuvik. Same thing at Arctic Village. And in the teens here along the Arctic coast, in the case of Barrow, though, just 10 degrees, but up to 41 at Kotzebue. 25 Shishmaref, a cool 22 degrees with some fog there at Tin City, but up to 44 in Nome. 28 and some breezy conditions at Gamble. 51 McGrath, 53 here at Galena for one of the warmer locations. Otherwise upper 40s here across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. Cooler out along the coast, 36 at Tuksuk Bay. Upper 30s for the Pribilofs. Upper 30s to lower 40s for the Aleutians, and mostly in the lower 40s here for the eastern Aleutians to the Alaska Peninsula. But Cold Bay did push up to 47. And lows tonight in the 30s to lower 40s for the Panhandle. Otherwise teens to 20s to lower 30s for south central Alaska, especially the Copper River Basin. Mid 30s along the coast. 40 is all the colder you'll get at Kodiak tonight. Otherwise mid to upper 30s for Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern Aleutians, with upper 20s to lower 30s over much of the interior. Back out to the west, coolest up along the Arctic coast and the North Slope, with temperatures staying about where they were for the highs today, and then warming into the 20s up there tomorrow, and near 40 for the Brooks Range or the North Slope, and then back into the 50 to 60 degree range here for the looks like the lower and mid Yukon and Kuskokwim River Valley areas, with some mid 50s back into the central Tanana Valley, with mid 50s over just about all of south central Alaska as well as the southeast coast. And moving on to the flying weather, looks good flying wise here, except for the Arctic coast, but in between there and then down to the south, good VFR just about all areas. Some IFR, the north side of the Seward Peninsula, western part of St. Lawrence Island, scattered around the southern and southeast Bering Sea here, like the Alaska Peninsula, maybe the eastern Aleutians, and with that frontal system, still looks like it'll be IFR to possibly low IFR tonight through tomorrow there for Kodiak Island, improving as you go north, and that's spreading into the southern southeast coast during the afternoon. Anatuvik and Adigan, both VFR in either approach. Lake Clark and Merrill, though, look for some possible marginal VFR in the eastern entrances and through the passes, but off to the east, VFR. Rainy, optimistically VFR, either approach. And windy, same forecast. Isabel and Mentesta both wide open tomorrow for Tanita, VFR continuing. Portage, much like today, marginal on the east side, but VFR to the west, and Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels at the surface tomorrow morning, dropping down a little bit here over the west central Bering Sea, and then cutting up near the Pribilofs up into the southwest interior and eastward just north of the coastline through the northern Panhandle. Icing threats, again, that area as the front edges eastward toward the coast, especially the southern areas. Icing threats will increase as well back across the Gulf of Alaska, but for the most part staying south of the coast here, and then back into northeast Bristol Bay and Kodiak Island. But this area will shift northward a little bit, mostly over overnight Saturday night and into early Sunday, but beginning to really dissipate, and then some scattered icing back out to the west. Looking at the winds aloft chart, pretty weak flow from the southeast here. A couple of weak disturbances, one up in this area, and then of course the main low down south of Kodiak Island. Main jet here staying well to the south of the area, so no big storms or any kind of wind expected in the state. For the 9,000 foot winds, still pretty brisk though at this level. That's right across Kodiak Island. Up to 40 knots possibly for the North Gulf Coast. Southern areas here coming, that'll cut across the southern Kenai Peninsula, and then markedly lighter just as you move inland. Southeast coast, the strongest winds along and off the coast, and will actually stay that way and begin to dissipate here from southeast to northwest. These velocities won't shift inland, they'll just kind of pull back to the northwest as the whole frontal boundary weakens, but 50 to 55 knots coming right up across the Gulf into the Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay areas, and coming across the mountains there into Bristol Bay probably will make for some pretty good turbulence conditions there. Again, also due to the northwest winds back over the eastern Aleutians, moderate chop, Alaska Peninsula as well, up into Bristol Bay, eastward along and across the Gulf of Alaska, or I should say just near or south of the North Gulf Coast. But in the afternoon, could see some moderate chop, especially for smaller aircraft here for northern Cook Inlet, Turnagain Arm areas, all the way down along the Queen Charlotte Islands, and then improving conditions slowly out there over the Aleutians. And when I return, we'll take a look at the marine forecasts.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ed Cornfield. On behalf of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media, welcome to another edition of Hangar Flying. My guest this evening is Walt Parker. Walt came up to Alaska in 1946 to work for the Civil Aeronautics Administration. During that time, he also ran an air taxi out of Minchumina. He also worked under Governors Bill Egan and Jay Hammond. And at 87, he's still going strong, pretty active, and he's also currently a fellow with the Institute of the North. Welcome to Hangar Flying.
Well, thank you.
So let's start out by telling the folks a little bit about your history, early history in aviation in Alaska.
Well, I arrived in Fairbanks at the end of the year in '46, and I didn't have a pilot's license. I'd been doing some air crewing in the Navy, and I badly wanted to fly, so I had a wife and child to take care of too, and I had to find enough money in my FAA salary, CA then, to fly. But by '49, I was going steady and flying a lot. Then we moved out to Lake Minchumina from Fairbanks, and the golden heart of Alaska, probably the prettiest place in Alaska, if not the globe.
So what was the first airplane that you flew out in Minchumina, Lake Minchumina?
That was PA-16, and that was the predecessor to the famous Piper Pacer, the PA-20, and it held 4 people, but it didn't have flaps, and so, but it was a good plane on skis. It was light enough that you wouldn't get really bogged down in the snow, and ski operations were critical.
Mm-hmm. And what engine did that have in there?
115.
115 horse engine. So
yeah.
To haul 4 people, that'd be a challenge on some days, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
So you did some air taxiing in the Minchumina area, and tell us briefly about what that involved.
Mostly flying trappers out to their trap lines and flying their gear and food out to them, and occasional flying people to town. Northern Consolidated was operating then, so they took care of most of the passenger traffic to town, but if somebody needed to go to Tanana, I could take them up there and what have you.
So I'm going to jump forward quite a bit of time. Several years ago, not that many now, you were involved with a flight to the North Pole with your, I think it was your neighbor, Ron Sheardown, is that right?
Right.
Can you tell us about that? Because that was a pretty interesting flight.
Yeah, that was the year 2000, and Ron invited me along, and there were, let's see, 4 of us in the airplane, and Ron, of course, longtime pilot, and his co-pilot was a famous pilot whose name escapes me at the moment. And we flew up to Fairbanks, flew from Fairbanks to Barrow, gassed up, and went up to the pole. Landed at the pole, took our pictures at the pole, took off and flew on to Spitsbergen. So
I'll have to stop you for a second because the airplane was an AN-2. It's a Russian airplane,
Right.
biplane,
Yeah.
very large. And go ahead.
and we had a 185, Cessna 185 with us, and that was, you know, really stretching it. It had to put all the gas in the fuselage we could for it to make that trip. But the AN-2, good old airplane. Ron bought it new in Poland just a few years before this trip. I think he bought it in '96. And so away we went. We got to spend a couple of nights in Longyearbyen in Spitsbergen, and got filled up with food and what have you, and ran into the guy who were going to come back across the top of Greenland and landed alert up there, and the end of the dew line. And so we, the guy had never been to the North Pole, even though he ran Arctic Canada and Arctic Aviation for Norway. So he said, come along. So he climbed on board, and then there were 5 of us, and away we went. And it was 700 miles, as I remember, to the pole. And we flew over about 600 polar bears in that 700-mile trip, most of them with cubs, but 600 adults, and more polar bears than I've ever seen in one spot.
And Walt, I'm going to have to stop you here because we're running out of time, but I would like to get you back on the next show and we'll finish the story. We're getting to the exciting part here, and I hate to stop you, but I just want to tell the viewers that tune in next time and we'll finish the story. Thanks very much for watching Hanger Flying, and we'll continue Walt's story on the next program. Have a good night and fly safe.
Look for small craft advisories here along the coast, at least for a portion of the day tomorrow from an east or east-southeast direction. Inside waters, lighter winds, maybe up to 20 knots down here in the southern inner channels, but lighter and more variable up to the north. Then on Sunday, definitely lighter winds, southeast for the most part, a little more southerly down west of Prince of Wales Island, about 15 knots, otherwise east to southeast, mostly southeast, 10 to 15 knots. The inside waters generally from a variable to southeast direction, 10 or even 5 to 15 knots. For the North Gulf Coast tomorrow, look for gales, especially early in the day, 35 to 40 knots right in across the Barren Islands into Kamishak Bay, and then gradually coming down to small craft advisories for most of the Kodiak Island marine zones here on the east side and west side, Chillicothe Strait. Northeast, 20 to 30 knots for Cook Inlet, Prince William Sound, about 20 knots. For the Sunday forecast, we'll go about 15 for Prince William Sound, winds down to 20 knots from the North Gulf Coast, and northeasterlies about 15, Chillicothe Strait up into Cook Inlet, and then 20 knots or 20 knots plus in the afternoon hours coming out of Turnagain Arm. Of course, those will turn southeast there and cut across West Anchorage. And for Bristol Bay, northeast up to 30 knots here, right down along and north of the Alaska Peninsula, northeast Sitkinak to say Chignik, and then mostly a northwest wind here for the Alaska Peninsula from Sandpoint out to Cape Sarachev. For the Sunday outlook, brisk wind or small craft advisories here, north on the Bering side of the peninsula, northwest on the Pacific side, northeast there still, and lighter southwest of Kodiak Island, and northeast about 15 to 20 knots for Bristol Bay. And then for Monday, or for the Aleutians on Saturday, northwest 20 to 30 knots, so pretty good chance of seeing some small craft advisories coming down here for the central Aleutians and northwest down to 20 knots there for the western areas. And for Sunday, the small craft advisory winds now mostly on the eastern portion of this zone and diminishing back to west, high pressure rolling through the central Aleutians, 15-knot winds associated with that, and then the southwesterlies picking up as you head west. For the Bering Sea here along the coast, northeast up to 30 knots, but becoming a little more lighter and variable from the northeast at about 15 up across St. Lawrence Island. Northerlies 20 knots for the Pribilofs, northwest 15 for the northern Bering Sea. Then under high pressure, this area will become variable at 10. And north 10 there for St. Lawrence Island, northwest at about 15 for the southwest coast, and north coming down to 15 knots for the Pribilofs. And for the eastern Arctic coast, easterlies 15 to 20 knots. That'll be the strongest wind speed area there. The central coast all the way down to Cape Lisburne, pretty light, 5 to 10 knots there, and very light northerlies for the Chukchi Sea. And about the only change in store for Sunday is just making these northerly winds here. Still quite light, 5 to 10 knots. Easterlies at 10 knots for the central and west side, and then the eastern areas here 15 to 20 knots. For tonight, again, this front edging its way eastward, but still remaining well off the coast here. So just some variable clouds for the Panhandle, mostly clear this evening, and then rain continuing with pretty brisk east winds through most of the evening hours and into tonight, but you can see the gradient diminishing back to the south and southwest, staying pretty damp there, but the wind's increasing here as those northwest winds and the gradient, and the colder air comes into the eastern illusions for rain and snow showers there. Just some very isolated shower activity over the interior, otherwise variably cloudy to some areas mostly clear. And for tomorrow, that front keeps a chance of moisture here up along the southern Kenai Peninsula coast, definitely for Kodiak. Mostly blocked by the Aleutian Range here, so just some clouds and a few showers making it into Bristol Bay and over the southwest. A risk of a shower due to this trough here over the Panhandle there, so a few more clouds, but still not too bad. And then it looks like definitely tomorrow night and Sunday, an increase in the showers there as that weakening front moves through. And then the rainfall or showers right along the immediate coastline here beginning to just taper off to a few showers in the afternoon hours, but staying on the cloudy, damp side for Kodiak Island. Pretty nice up over the interior again, especially out west. Have a great evening and enjoy your weekend.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.